Cad Bane and Sabe Tarkentown falling back down to expected values. Yoda Datavault maintaining a consistent spot in the meta, and Hantu ECL still looking like the best deck in the format. Hello and welcome to the Secrets of Power Week 9 Meta Report. We will be covering Weeks 8 and 9 in this video. Let's hop right in. Looking at the top 8 decks, top 8 conversion rates for the last 2 weeks, we aren't seeing anything too surprising here. Biggest two standouts would be Han 1 Yellow, Kylo Ren Datavault, but since Mesa, these decks have been on the rise. Han 1 Yellow having an amazing performance, being the 7th most represented deck over the last 2 weeks, but the 3rd highest in terms of conversion rates, and the highest in terms of first place finishes. Kylo Ren Datavault possibly taking some of the meta share from Kira Datavault, which over the last 5 or 6 weeks now really has fallen out of favor, which I've talked many times about how I'm very surprised due to how good it is into the current meta, really only having a couple bad matchups. Kylo Ren potentially being even better positioned, so we are seeing that come up in the meta and take its share of it, and we are still seeing Kira perform reasonably well. Rest of the decks on this, nothing really standing out too much. Some decks that skew a little bit more towards rogue decks or lower popularity decks, but this is about what we should be expecting to convert to top 8s in a very wide meta. Also, this doesn't show everything. I excluded all of the one-ofs, since that would almost double, if not a little more, the size of the length of the image, so I just kept it to 2 and above. Still a lot of different decks converting to top 8. And on the champion side, nothing really standing out here aside from Han 1 Yellow, which we already discussed. We are still seeing this unknown thing, which is a little unfortunate. Those are just decks that fail to import within the dataset, which does throw the entire dataset kind of off, but we just gotta make the best of it. Comparing weeks 8 and 9 to week 7, we aren't really seeing much of a change here. Cad Bane has come into the top most played decks, but this is only looking at 5% or more. We're not even seeing anything above 10% still, which is where we start really getting to the point of this deck is a big sizable part of the meta, but even 10% still kind of low. We're just seeing the meta still be very wide here. Vader Yellow had just week 7 that it was above 5%. We are seeing Han 1 Green fall under 5% again. But all in all, nothing's really changed. The unique leader-based pairs are about what they should be for a sample of this size. 127 in a sample that's a third the size is about right. Unique leader and base top 8 decks, again, about where it should be and consistent with previous samples. About 30% of unique decks converting to top 8s. Meta status, still very wide. I've talked about this a lot in previous videos. Not anything changing. And I don't expect anything to change over the remainder of this set, as we are pretty set in the trend line. Doing a slightly deeper dive this week, as I mentioned in the intro, Cad has fallen back down, which is what we expected. I'd been discussing that a lot since its rise in popularity, saying that this is more of a bait than an actually good deck. Good players will take it and inflate the numbers briefly, and then they'll probably be off it again, which is exactly what we're seeing. It's back down to under a 50% match win rate, which it should be around 50%, looking at a 48% over the last 2 weeks. And its conversion rate has never really been all too good, aside from the brief time where good players were taking it. And even then, the big thing about Cad is when Cad was the deck to play at an event like Mesa and other major events recently, it has still not hit the numbers that a deck like Yoda has, that a deck like Hantu ECL or even a Hantu Blue, like those decks have hit way higher numbers at their peaks than something like Cad. So we are seeing it fall back down here, which is what was expected. Sabe Tarkentown did have a reasonably high conversion rate of 22.9%, but the sample wasn't really that big, only 35 decks. and its win rate was back down to about 50%. Yoda is still holding steady. Match win rate that we should be expecting around is about 55%. It's at 54.1. Conversion rate we should be expecting around 20%. A little under this, but about there. Very similar for Hantu ECL. Should be expecting a 58% win rate about. Basically where it is. And should be expecting, low to mid 20s. And it's on the higher side of 20s, but given that we're only looking at a 2-week sample, this is about what should be, this is within the parameters should be expected. We also did see in this dataset over the last 2 weeks, Sabe Tarkin Town wasn't really a counter to Hantu decks, which I have discussed previously that I expected this to happen. The leader doesn't have a ping on it. It's not really going to be doing what it needs to. It's relying on Hantu using its ability to create something to Tarkin Town in the first couple turns. It does turn off stuff like Ogdo, but even something like Grogu now lives compared to Cat Tarkin Town that can ping it down to 3 and then Tarkin Town it. Sabe Tarkin Town seeming like it was even more of a flash, even more of a bubble than Cad Tarkin Town, and I'm not really surprised about that. And this trend continues through the rest of the data. If you've watched my previous videos, you know about how decks have been performing, and nothing's really changed here. 2 decks that have stood out over the last 2 weeks, which we will be looking at more in this video, are Han 1 Yellow and Kylo 5 Data Vault. They do seem like they are forces in the current meta and on the rise. Han 1 Yellow had a very good match win rate of 65.2% and conversion rate of 37.8%. Kylo 5 had a 63% match win rate and conversion rate of 23.6%. I did put the number of decks from the last 2 weeks in here as well, just to put emphasis on this is still a very small sample, and because these decks haven't been popular throughout the set, we don't really have a bigger sample to look at. So we are going to look at those closer over the next few slides. There is a list of decks here: Yoda Data Vault, Hantu ECL, Han 1 Green, Hantu Blue Force, Tarkin Town decks, Piet Red, Anakin Data Vault, Kira Data Vault. I looked at all of these in the week 6 deeper dive, and nothing's really changed for these, so that video is still relevant. Can go back and look at that to get more information on any of these. There is also a question to be asked: are there any decks still under the radar? Like Han 1 Yellow and Kylo 5 popping up a little bit over the last few weeks. Maybe there's something else that's still being missed. I don't have a suggestion on what this is currently, but I do think that given the speed at which SWU meta evolves, it's very slow compared to card games with more robust online play. There could be something still out there that is under the radar at the moment, so that's something to stay open to. Looking at Han 1 Yellow, it wasn't a huge sample, only 45 out of 1,583 decks. Did have a good match win rate, did have a good conversion rate, and looking at its full data set and 2-week data set, we are seeing it is fairly well positioned. Similar to Cad Tarkin Town, Sabe Tarkin Town, it is weak to Yoda, so Yoda's still maintaining a very important spot in the meta, in the counter flow, counter chart, counter tree. However, compared to Cad, this is seeming a slight bit more resistant. That definitely compared to Sabe. I'm not sure if it will maintain these numbers as the sample on this deck increases. I do think this is a bit of a bubble as well and will fall down, but I am expecting this to maintain a better spot, a stronger spot in the meta than the Tarkin Town decks while performing a similar role. Moving on to the Kylo 5 Data Vault. Again, very small sample here, and we are seeing a very good matchup spread. As I mentioned earlier, this is very similar to Kira's and Yoda's matchup spread, but the sample is a lot smaller. One thing to note about this is it is winning the head-to-heads into Kira and Yoda while still being good into many of the decks that both of those are good into. So this, again, may be inflated because of the small sample size. We'll have to see if it holds over the coming weeks as the season finishes. But this does seem to be a very good choice and kind of filling the role that I was expecting Kira to fill. One thing that I'm fairly surprised about at the moment, and I'm curious if it will continue. Oh, this the top one's supposed to say 2 weeks. I forgot to add that apparently. Is the matchup into Hantu ECL. I am kind of surprised it's favored for Kylo. Maybe this is just it can get to the 7 resource turn and produce a big sentinel in the ground, and that is enough to stabilize. I would somewhat suspect that Hantu ECL should be able to punch through on the flip turn, if not the turn after. If Kylo's ramped, though, that turn after is the 7 resource turn. When Han's on 6, Kylo's on 7. Maybe that's enough to stabilize. So it could be that Kylo is the way to go and may even be the best unit. If you like that unit-based control strategy, the direction to go moving forward. Update to my tier list. This is the smaller one. I've moved Kylo up from tier 2 to tier 1. I've put it in front of Kira, in front of Yoda. I've dropped Han 1 Green down to tier 2, tentatively behind Han 1 Yellow. I think Han 1 Green might be better, but we can't ignore Han 1 Yellow's amazing performance over the last few weeks. Han 1 Yellow potentially even having a performance that does warrant putting it into tier 1. I would use the argument that we haven't had enough of a sample yet, and the reason why Kylo follows that same line of logic, where we don't have enough of a sample yet, but I have put it tentatively in tier 1 because it is very, very similar to the unit-based control game plan, while the tempo game plan from Han 1 Yellow hasn't really existed many other places in the format. The closest comparison would be the Tarkin Town decks. So both of these decks, Kylo, Han 1 Yellow, they could be tier 1, they could be tier 2, tentatively have these positions, and that's all that's changed. So Han 1 Green down 1 tier, Kylo up 1 tier, and Han 1 Yellow up 1 tier. This is the extended tier list. Again, not much has changed here, just the changes I mentioned on the last slide. My recommended decks page has not really changed, just some of the information on this page has changed slightly. There is still, I think, no clear first choice. Maybe there is, as we are still seeing Hantu ECL consistently be the best performing deck, despite decks popping up to counter it, like Han 1 Yellow. That does come with a warning, though, because we are seeing Han 1 Yellow convert to top 8 as well as it is, and take down these events, that maybe Hantu ECL is a bit of a gamble. It will get you to top 8, but maybe it's not the best deck to win top 8 anymore. Maybe that is Han 1 Yellow. We'll have to see what happens. So Hantu ECL still maintaining my number 1 recommendation. Hantu Blue Force still close behind it. These decks don't really have a lot of counters in the meta. Primarily Cad Tarkin Town and Han 1 Yellow for Hantu ECL, with Kylo 5 Data Vault possibly joining it as a counter to Hantu Blue Force. We did see as well that Kylo 5's close to 50-50 in the small sample we have into Hantu ECL. And then, as such, Kylo 5's taking the spot there that I normally recommend Kira or Yoda in, as it does seem to be following that same game plan, but doing it better than these decks currently. I'm not sure if this is just because of a small sample size. We will have to see over the next couple weeks. But right now, this is my 3rd recommended deck. And Han 1 Yellow is notably missing from here. And that ties in pretty heavily with what I talked about in the tier list slide, where we have similar decks to look at for Kylo 5 Data Vault. We know that those decks have been very successful in this format, including a 7-flip leader in Yoda Data Vault, so Kylo's flipping at that same time as Yoda. So we can more safely assume that Kylo's numbers are accurate. While Han 1 Yellow, these tempo decks have not really existed, and the closest ones in the Tarkin Town decks, even when they were at their best, they still weren't amazing choices. So I am a little skeptical about Han 1 Yellow. Let's see what happens over the next few weeks, but this could be the best deck in the format. We have to see what happens. Could be less of a bait than the Tarkin Town decks. And as I mentioned with the Tarkin Town decks, it is, regardless of if this is a bubble or not, it is good that it exists as a foil to Han 2. Excuse me. I will try to get that edited out on YouTube. So my current choice is Han 2 ECL. And that is always prioritizing games played, so I don't have any more tournaments this set, but if I did, I would be playing Han 2 ECL a lot right now. It is the hardest aggressive deck I've ever played in this game. There's so much decision space in it. It needs a lot. It's not a deck that can just be picked up, especially compared to something like Sabine, where Sabine, you probably don't need too many games to really get a grasp of the deck. As an aggressive, that tends to be the trend in card games. Aggressive decks, they can have a high skill cap, but to get the feel for them, and even to approach that skill cap, it requires far less time for more complex decks. And Han 2 ECL, because of that discount, because of all the options it provides, especially on the flip turn, it is a very complex deck, despite the fact that it's playing over a few, despite the fact that it's playing a much shorter game. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share the video if you liked it. And McClunky Gaming is offering coaching. You can find out more information in our Discord on that. We've also, McClunky Gaming has started producing weekly content. You can find that on our YouTube page. And I'm going to ask the same question I did last week. What would you guys like to see? Would you like to see gameplay videos? Would you like to see deck techs? Let me know what content you would like to see, and I will do my best to provide it. And as always, thank you for watching. May the cards be with you.